You asked about a shooting that we just had in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It was an act of domestic terrorism.
Tonight, new clashes between anti-ICE demonstrators and federal law enforcement in Minneapolis.
This is also a community on edge. There are roughly 80,000 Somalis living here in the area.
And so in speaking with several people who currently live there and work there in that city.
At 4:47 in the morning, the historic neighborhood along Portland Avenue South in Minneapolis was dead silent. The street lights reflected off the frozen sidewalks, and the porch lights of the Victorian homes glowed faintly in the winter darkness. To the residents sleeping inside, it was just another quiet, cold Tuesday in January. But outside, the street was quietly being swallowed by a shadow army. A column of armored black SUVs rolled into position without sirens, cutting their headlights a block away. More than 250 federal agents from the FBI and Immigration and Customs Enforcement moved with the synchronized precision of a military strike team. They weren't wearing standard patrol uniforms. They were geared for war, heavy body armor, ballistic shields, and night vision optics. Their target wasn't a cartel safe house in the desert or a gang hideout in the industrial district. It was a stately private residence with manicured hedges and a freshly shoveled driveway. This was the home of a sitting judge. At 4:52 in the morning, the order was given. The silence was shattered by the deafening crack of flashbangs detonating in the foyer. Federal agents, search warrant, drop your weapons. The neighborhood woke up to the sound of shouting and the shattering of glass, but the resistance inside the house was instantaneous and terrifying. This wasn't a confused homeowner reaching for a baseball bat. Agents breaching the front door were met by 21 armed guards. These men were positioned in the hallways and stairwells like a private army. Whatever was hidden inside this house was worth dying for. But in less than 10 minutes, the agents would discover something far worse than drugs. Behind a false wall in the basement lay a document that would threaten to collapse the entire state justice system. Welcome back. What you are witnessing is the dismantling of Operation Infiltration, a criminal conspiracy. So the routine traffic stop that changed everything deep, it turned the American justice system into a cartel weapon. For years, the residents of Minneapolis trusted Judge Hassan Dwale. He was a pillar of the community, a man who grew up in poverty and rose to become a respected voice for fairness and reform. But federal agents now alleged that his robe was nothing more than a costume. The raid on Portland Avenue South didn't happen by accident. It began exactly 24 hours earlier with a chaotic scene that looked like nothing more than a viral internet video. On the afternoon of January 7th, a patrol unit stopped a vehicle driven by Renee Good, a 37-year-old local woman. The encounter quickly escalated. Bystanders filmed the woman screaming that she had rights, that the stop was illegal. The video hit social media instantly, racking up millions of views. Commenters called it harassment. They called it abuse of power. But the camera didn't see what was in the trunk. When agents opened the rear cargo panel, the narrative collapsed. Inside, wrapped in heavy black plastic, was 80 kilos of high-purity methamphetamine. Next to it sat $2.3 million in vacuum-sealed cash. This wasn't a civilian having a bad day. Now, New York Times is reporting we know about at least 3 initially that stepped down. This news came out today, and they did this. They resigned from their positions entirely, not just the investigation. This was a courier moving a shipment worth millions. Under interrogation, the courier didn't crack immediately, but the data did. Investigators analyzed her travel logs and financial history. They found that she wasn't working for a street dealer. She was making deliveries on a schedule that perfectly matched the court docket of Judge Dwell. The financial forensics team uncovered the smoking gun. In the last 5 years, $417 million had moved through shell accounts linked to the judge. Think about that number, $417 million. There is no legal way for a public servant to generate that kind of wealth. The money was moving through 3 continents, Europe, the Middle East, and East Asia, in transfers timed to coincide with major drug rulings in his courtroom. When defendants with cartel ties appeared before him, evidence was suppressed, sentences were reduced, delays were granted. The judge wasn't just impartial, he was on the payroll. Federal command realized they were dealing with a super facilitator, a man who used his legal authority to guarantee the safety of narcotics shipments. But they still had one major problem. They knew the judge was the head of the snake. But they didn't know where the venom was stored. A house in a residential neighborhood shouldn't be able to process tons of product. That is when the tactical team deployed their secret weapon. 3 hours before the raid, the FBI launched high-altitude thermal imaging drones over the judge's property. They were looking for heat tunnel discovered $74 million in cash leaks from the house. What they found was an anomaly that made no sense. They've seen a lot of this, a lot of the confrontation, but they do say that it's isolated to certain parts of the city. Specifically, the ground behind the detached garage was glowing hot on the infrared spectrum. There was massive airflow venting from beneath the frozen soil. It wasn't a sewer line. It was a ventilation system for something massive buried underground. The drone intelligence had been accurate. The heat signature behind the garage wasn't a glitch. It was a target. But before the federal teams could breach the earth, they had to survive the house. The firefight inside the residence on Portland Avenue South was brief, chaotic, and terrifyingly precise. As the tactical units pushed through the front door, they were met by a wall of resistance. The 21 guards inside were not local street enforcers. They moved with military discipline, taking cover behind marble pillars and firing down the narrow corridors to create kill zones. Bullets shredded the drywall and shattered the chandeliers. The air filled with the acrid smell of propellant and pulverized plaster, but the federal response was overwhelming. Using flashbangs to disorient the defenders and ballistic shields to close the distance, the agents advanced room by room. They didn't shoot to kill, they shot to neutralize. The lead tactical officer later reported that the goal was to take prisoners, not bodies. They needed these men to talk. One by one, the guards were forced to the ground and zip-tied. Within 10 minutes, the shooting stopped. The house was secure. But the silence that followed was even more disturbing than the noise. Agents began to sweep the property, and the scale of the operation became undeniable. This wasn't a home. It was a logistics hub disguised as a mansion. In a guest bedroom behind a false wall, they found 900 kilos of narcotics stacked like bricks of gold. The city and state lawmakers are going to demand that the FBI cooperate with Minnesota's Bureau of Criminal Apprehension on this investigation. In the basement, metal crates held another 1.4 tons of heroin and synthetic compounds. And then there was the money, suitcases, storage bins, and floor safes were overflowing with cash. When the counting was finished, the total seized from the residence alone was $74 million. It was enough currency to destabilize the local economy. But the most critical discovery wasn't the cash or the drugs. It was what lay beneath the frozen ground outside. Agents moved to the detached garage, the source of the heat anomaly. They cleared away the snow and debris to reveal a hydraulic lift system hidden in the floor. When they activated it, the concrete slab slid back to reveal a gaping reinforced tunnel entrance. This wasn't a crude escape route. It was industrial infrastructure. The tunnel ran deep beneath the property, equipped with lighting, ventilation, and a conveyor system. It was a command bunker designed to survive a war. Ask yourself this. If a sitting judge can build a fortress like this in the middle of an American city without anyone noticing, how deep does the corruption really go? Hit the like button if you demand transparency from every public official. While the physical evidence was being cataloged, the Cyber Warfare Division was fighting a different battle upstairs. 5 encrypted computers had been seized from the judge's private study. They were still warm. The screens were dark, but the hard drives were spinning. The analysts knew they had a window of minutes before the encryption keys rotated or a remote kill switch wiped the data. Using forensic overrides, the ghost corridor. Port officials arrested managed to freeze the system state. What they saw on the monitors made the blood drain from their faces. The computers weren't just tracking the inventory in the basement. They were connected to a live network tracking shipments across the entire state. Take a look at this video. This was from the early stages of the investigation on Wednesday, just as the scene was getting processed. We reached out to the U.S. Attorney's Office for more information on why they're denying BCA access. and every single data line pointed to one specific location, the port. The files revealed a list of clearance codes and override protocols that had been used for 7 years. 12 specific port officials, men whose names appeared on no public records together, had been systematically overriding security checks for specific containers. They weren't forging documents. They were using their legitimate credentials to wave the contraband through. The agents realized the terrifying truth. The judge wasn't just a local boss. He was the gatekeeper. His house was the brain. The tunnel was the storage, but the port was the mouth of the beast. The network had created a ghost corridor. Shipments of illicit cargo were being offloaded from international vessels, bypassed through customs in under 9 minutes, and disappearing into the American interior before anyone knew they had arrived. The lead investigator looked at the timestamp on the screen. The next major shipment was scheduled to clear customs in less than 2 hours. There was no time for a briefing. There was no time for a plan B. The tactical commander grabbed his radio. He didn't order a retreat. He ordered a redeployment. The sun was just starting to rise over the harbor as 200 agents sprinted back to their vehicles. The raid on the house was over. The battle for the port was about to begin. At 6:22 in the morning, the port complex was just waking up. Massive cranes were idling, and the fog was lifting off the water. So I present there to conduct ICE operations to round up illegal aliens within the state and within the country. And in this particular case, they were there conducting such operations. To the dock workers arriving for their shift, it looked like another gray industrial morning. But the convoy of black SUVs speeding toward Gate 4 was about to change everything. The federal teams didn't wait for permission to enter. They smashed through the security barriers, tires screeching on the wet asphalt. The element of surprise was their only advantage. If the cartel crew at the docks realized the judge had been taken, the evidence would disappear into the ocean within minutes. Agents split into 3 waves. Team Alpha secured the customs office. Team Bravo swept the bonded warehouses. Team Charlie raced toward the waterline, targeting Warehouse C, the specific location flagged by the judge's encrypted files. Resistance was immediate. Armed guards emerged from the shadows of the shipping containers, firing wildly at the advancing agents. The sound of gunfire echoed off the steel hulls of the docked ships, but without the element of surprise, the defenders were quickly overwhelmed. Federal marksmen neutralized the threat, forcing a surrender in under 7 minutes. When the agents cut the locks on Warehouse C, the scale of the operation finally hit them. It was designated as a cold storage unit for frozen produce. But behind the pallets of lettuce and seafood, they found the stockpile. Stacked 3 levels high were sealed crates of narcotics packaged for inland transport, 1.1 tons of heroin, 800 kilos of fentanyl, drums of synthetic compounds measured in industrial quantities. This wasn't a shipment. It was a distribution center for the entire Midwest. While the tactical teams secured the drugs, the Somali-Minnesota connection and cartel links financial investigators raided the administrative offices overlooking the docks. A lot of agents in the Metro today and Operation Metro Surge had some people cheering their efforts. Other people, though, like Governor Tim Walz, were angry that it was happening at all. They were looking for the dirty dozen, the 12 officials identified in the judge's ledger. They found them, or rather, they found their price. Binders seized from the office safe contained the clearance histories. Every single illicit shipment had been signed off by the same small group of signatories. The bank records confirmed the betrayal. Each official had received monthly transfers ranging from $280,000 to $1.4 million. The money was routed through the same shell companies that paid the judge. They hadn't just looked the other way. They had sold the keys to the gate. As the morning wore on, a final desperate attempt was made to save the cargo. A tugboat near the edge of the marina powered up prematurely, casting its lines in a frantic bid to flee. Federal interceptor boats swarmed it within minutes. On board, agents found another 420 kilograms of high V-value narcotics strapped to pallets, ready to be dumped at sea. By noon, the operation was effectively over. The port was locked down. The judge was in handcuffs. The network was dark. The final accounting of what was seized that day is staggering. Between the judge's fortress and the port warehouse, federal agents confiscated a total of 5.5 tons of narcotics. The cash seized from the residents and the frozen accounts totaled over $74 million in immediate currency. But the most chilling statistic isn't the money or the weight. It is the human cost. Intelligence analysts estimate that the synthetic opioids moving through this specific corridor were enough to supply millions of lethal doses. This single network, protected by a gavel and a badge, was likely responsible for fueling overdose clusters that claimed tens of thousands of lives. Hassan Duail, the man who once sat in judgment of others, now faces a future in a federal supermax prison. The charges against him, racketeering, narcotics trafficking, and corruption, carry multiple life sentences. The 26 guards are in custody. The 12 port officials are facing federal indictments. But as the dust settles, the city of Minneapolis is left with a difficult question. This operation didn't happen in the shadows. It happened in a mansion on a quiet street. It happened in a busy port. It happened in a courtroom. It succeeded because people trusted the uniforms. They trusted the titles. The raid on Portland Avenue South proved one undeniable truth. The most dangerous criminals don't always kick down your door. Sometimes they are the ones signing the warrants. We will continue to track the trial of Judge Duail and the exposure of the remaining political connections. If you want to see the full breakdown of the court documents as they are released, make sure you are subscribed. Until then, stay safe and stay vigilant.